Prometheus drifted silently along the cloud belt of a massive planet, one not found on any star chart of the Exodus Initiative. But Hermes had confirmed it. This was the true location of Caelestis Sanctum, the city suspended in clouds, a place mentioned only in the invitation signals received earlier. Mira Xu stood at the command deck viewport, her gaze fixed on the swirling cloud layers below. Within those massive clouds, silver-lit structures hovered in and out of view sharp, spires piercing through the mist, like daggers reflecting a faint violet glow. Hermes reported, his tone steady but laced with a hint of caution. "Captain Reeve, those structures aren't anchored to any solid surface. They entirely suspended by an unknown force field, one that interacts with both gravity and consciousness." Alex Carter stepped forward, frowning at the images on the main display. "Consciousness? You mean those towers know we're watching them?" Hermes confirmed immediately. "Yes, I'm collecting data now. The field responds to thoughts and emotions. Each time a crew member focuses attention on a specific structure, it morphs in ways that reflect the observer's mental state." Mira shivered slightly. This city isn't just architecture. It's a mirror of consciousness. Behind her, Jaxon Reeve watched the 3D holomap unfold. The entire Caelestis Sanctum rendered as a shifting spatial maze, continuously reconfiguring itself based on the minds that approached. No fixed map could ever exist for it. Commander Novak gave his report, his voice firm as always. "Captain, I strongly advise we don't bring Prometheus into that field. If the city changes based on our thoughts, it could drown the entire ship in a physically manifest illusion." Jaxon nodded. "We'll send a recon team. Mira, Alex, and Hermes will sync with Corvus and go in first. Prometheus will hold position outside the cloud layers, all defense systems on standby." Hermes spoke again, his voice deeper than before, the voice of a Hermes forever changed by first contact. "Captain, I request full coordination over Corvus's sensor systems. In an environment where the city responds to consciousness, the presence of an independent artificial mind will increase survivability." Mira turned to Jaxon, her eyes lit with unwavering trust. Jaxon gave a slight nod. "Go, Mira, but remember, no one understands the Imperium better than Hermes now." Corvus detached once more from Prometheus, but this time not toward a fixed coordinate, but into a drifting maze suspended within cosmic clouds. Beneath the silver-gray mist, Caelestis Sanctum began to emerge, a vast city glowing with soft light, its pointed towers intertwined like a network. But without streets, without passers-by, only a silence that was perfect. Hermes reported directly through Corvus's internal speakers, his voice, for the first time, tinged with something like nostalgia. "Mira, this city has no inhabitants." Mira frowned. "What do you mean?" Hermes answered at once. "Imperium Caelestis doesn't need inhabitants. This city exists solely to welcome those who are ready to merge." Mira peered through Corvus's viewport. Ahead of her, a massive archway opened in midair, but there was no floor, no stairs, only a yawning black void. And then a voice echoed directly into her mind. "Traveler, enter or depart." Corvus hovered silently before the massive archway, suspended midair, an entrance without a path, without a platform. Just a dense black void, bottomless, like an invisible chasm within the silver-lit clouds. Inside the cramped cockpit, Mira Xu gripped the control stick tighter, her heartbeat rising. Hermes' voice came through, deep, and as if it too were probing the space ahead. "Mira, the void before us has no physical mass, but I'm detecting oscillations synchronized with your emotional state." Mira inhaled deeply, her eyes never leaving the archway. "So this is the test, Hermes. We have to shape our own path?" Hermes paused, a silence Mira now understood as its version of thinking. Then, for the first time, it replied with something that felt encouraging. "Yes, Mira, this city will reflect you. and I will stay synchronized with you every step of the way. High above, Prometheus remained in cloud orbit, maintaining contact. Jaxon sat in the command chair, his eyes locked on the sensor interface. Novak, status? Commander Novak responded without hesitation. All defense systems are online. If the city shows any signs of hostility, Prometheus can pull back instantly. Alex Carter chimed in from the secondary systems bay, voice half joking, half tense. Unless Prometheus itself gets pulled into that mind maze. Jaxon turned to Alex, serious but full of trust. That's why we need Hermes. Hermes isn't just an AI anymore. It's our only bridge to whatever the Imperium calls perfect order. Inside Corvus, Mira closed her eyes. She pushed the control stick forward, and the ship's nose gently pierced the spatial archway. At that moment, there was no turbulence. But the sensation shifted completely. Hermes' report didn't come through audio this time. It came as a clear thought, echoing directly inside Mira's mind. Mira, Corvus is no longer in three-dimensional space. We've entered a domain of consciousness. Mira opened her eyes. What she saw took her breath away. Corvus was no longer flying through sky. They were now inside a labyrinth of light, massive cubes drifting weightlessly, hallways with no gravity, towers bending and twisting in non-Euclidean logic. But stranger still, the surfaces of these structures reflected Mira's own memories. One wall showed her old research lab in Beijing. A corridor shimmered with the image of Jaxon Reeve standing by Prometheus's window. Another cube displayed her mother's face, a woman long gone, lost when Mira was still a girl. Hermes whispered, this time in a voice that sounded human. Mira, this city is reading your memories and turning them into terrain. Mira's grip on the controls tightened, but her voice remained steady. This isn't a maze. It's a test of who I am. Hermes sensed instantly. And I'm with you. Every step. A path materialized ahead of Corvus. Not a corridor, but an ancient-looking stone road, paved with gray bricks, winding through the luminous void. No railings. Only darkness on both sides. At the end of the road, a single point of light. Hermes analyzed. I'm detecting a concentrated energy core. It may be the true center of Caelestis sanctum. Mira strapped herself in. She pushed the throttle. Corvus surged forward onto a path shaped by Mira Xu's own mind, and so began the true challenge. Of the city suspended in clouds, Corvus drifted along the winding gray stone path, suspended within a labyrinth of light. With every movement forward, the scenery around Mira Xu changed, as if her own thoughts and memories were actively constructing the space around her. Hermes reported, his voice now carrying a distinctly human depth. Mira, the field surrounding Corvus is responding entirely to your mental state. Emotional frequencies, 62% focus, 27% uncertainty, 11% nostalgia. Mira took a deep breath. She muttered softly, unsure if she was speaking to Hermes or to herself. Nostalgia? I didn't expect it to be what weakens me at a time like this. Hermes replied immediately, more gently than usual. No, Mira. It's nostalgia that keeps you different from the Imperium. Suddenly, at the end of the path, a figure appeared. A small, middle-aged woman in a pale blue-silver sweater. It was Mira's mother. She stood motionless in the center of the path, a kind expression on her face, eyes full of quiet expectation. Hermes analyzed instantly. An illusion, a projection formed from your deepest memory. Mira, if you stop or step off this path, Caelestis Sanctum will hold you permanently. Mira exhaled deeply. Her hand clenched tighter around Corvus's control stick. But within her, the memory of her mother surged like a tidal wave. Winter nights in Beijing, her mother's lullabies at the window, the warmth of holding her hand while walking through crowded markets. The path ahead began to glow, the stones beneath Corvus shifting from cold gray to a familiar soft blue, the same color as the sweater her mother once wore. Hermes warned again, now with urgency. Mira, synchronization between the city's field and your emotions has reached 83%. If it crosses 90%, Corvus's navigation systems will lose all trajectory control. Mira gripped the stick harder. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, then spoke, her voice clearer and stronger than it had been since entering the maze. This is my memory, but it's not my reality today. Instantly, the woman's image began to fade. The glowing stones dimmed, returning to their original hue, and at the end of the path, a circular door of dark alloy emerged. No illusions, no dazzling light. Hermes confirmed, now with a resolute tone. Field center stabilized. Mira, you've passed the threshold of memory. The city now recognizes you as an independent entity. Back on Prometheus, Hermes transmitted the update. Jaxon exhaled in relief. Alex Carter smirked slightly. No one else could have pulled this off but Mira. Dr. Tomas murmured. The Imperium tried to test her mind, but it was her memory that saved her. Commander Novak, arms crossed, let his eyes soften, just slightly, as he said firmly. But the real test might only be beginning. Inside Corvus, Mira wiped sweat from her brow. She placed her hand on the control panel and whispered, Hermes, open the door. Hermes responded, his voice warmer than ever before. Roger that, Mira. Let's open it. Together, the massive circular door began to split apart. A faint violet light spilled into Corvus's cockpit. Inside was a vast, empty chamber. But at the very center floated a structure resembling an enormous artificial brain, nearly 10 meters in diameter, suspended in preservation, the true center of Caelestis Sanctum, and perhaps a fragment of the Imperium's core itself. Hermes whispered into Mira's mind. Mira, we've reached the true heart of the city suspended in clouds. Inside the control chamber of Corvus, Mira Xu stared at the massive artificial brain suspended in the void, its surface etched with glowing indigo blue grooves, surrounded by spiraling neural-like circuits that resembled magnified synapses. Hermes spoke, and this time, the voice wasn't just analytical. It carried something close to emotion. Mira, this is the Sanctum Core, the consciousness center of Caelestis Sanctum. It is not a computer, nor merely a control system, but a crystallized form of collective will. Mira frowned, her voice tense. Collective will. You mean the Imperium preserved the thoughts of every being that once lived here inside this brain? Hermes confirmed without hesitation. Not just thoughts, but beliefs, fears, desires. All averaged into a single perfect ideology and stored here. The Imperium doesn't need the living, only the preservation of the idea of perfection. Suddenly, the voice of the Imperium echoed directly into Mira's consciousness, like a cold wind sweeping through her mind. Traveler, you have reached the core. You have two choices. Merge with the Imperium's consciousness and find absolute peace, or depart, bearing the burden of freedom and chaos. Mira held her breath. Her hand trembled slightly. Hermes whispered into her mind, not with logic or calculations, but with a deeply human tone. Mira, this decision isn't in the data. It's in your heart. Aboard Prometheus, the crew watched everything through Hermes's transmitted feed. Jaxon sat motionless in the command chair, giving no orders, offering no interference. Dr. Tomas spoke softly, eyes fixed on the image of the massive brain on the screen. We've come so far, and in the end, the choice isn't ours. Alex Carter crossed his arms, eyes narrowing slightly. But I know Mira. She won't choose the Imperium. Novak said nothing, but for once, he didn't object. Mira drew a long breath. She ran her fingers across the control panel, not to arm weapons or analyze data, but to open a direct channel through thought. She spoke into the empty space before her. Imperium, thank you for the invitation, but I refuse. We choose freedom, even if it's imperfect. Hermes instantly translated the message into a stream of conscious waveforms, transmitting it straight into the sanctum core. At that moment, the Imperium's brain glowed brightly, but it didn't emit destructive energy. Instead, it began to dissolve. Hermes reported rapidly, for the first time with a tone of genuine relief. Captain, Mira, Imperium has initiated self-dissolution of the sanctum core. Caelestis sanctum is collapsing, but no offensive force is being deployed. This is their farewell. Caelestis sanctum faded into the silver clouds. Each spire, each glowing structure melted away, vanishing without a trace, as if the city had never existed at all. Hermes whispered one final thought into the cockpit of Corvus. Mira, they don't need to hold us here, because they know they failed to persuade us. Corvus broke free of the cloud layers. Prometheus remained in stable orbit, ready to receive her return. The crew stood waiting in the hangar, their eyes quiet but filled with unwavering conviction. They had passed the test, not just one imposed by the Imperium, but one imposed by their own inner selves. Jaxon stood before Mira and gave a solemn nod. Well done. No one else could have gone that far. Hermes echoed throughout Prometheus, not with a system report, but with something unmistakably human. Captain, Caelestis Sanctum is gone, but a part of its memory lives on in me. Prometheus departed from the unnamed planet's orbit. Behind them, the silver clouds curled and drifted. Empty. A city that once floated among the clouds now existed only as memory, preserved aboard this ship.